So, guys, my name's Justin. For y'all that don't know me, I'm the operations here at Cervicide. Brian is going to be running this up. He's one of our pro staff members. He's been with Cervicide a long time. Definitely knows what he's doing. He comes down here and hunts with me every single year. We've done two hunts in a row, but we'll continue to do it. But he just finished up his Grand Slam. So we wanted to get him on here. We've been seeing a ton of questions about ballistics. It seems at least once a week somebody has a certain type of question about ballistics or ballistic related. So Brian wanted to jump on here and do at least a couple segments to make sure everyone is ready. And it looks like we have a couple guys on here that are going out west. So hopefully this helps. But Brian, I'll be quiet now and I will let you take it away. And yeah, I'll just kind of throw you questions as they come in.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me. So everyone, I've been hunting since I could honestly remember. Started when I was 12. I've been doing a lot of competitive shooting as well beforehand and all throughout high school and college. I was a 3-time indoor archery national champion through high school. And then also once I went through college, I really got into long range rifle shooting. I've been hunting pretty much anywhere and everywhere since I was 12 as well. I've hunted and successfully killed whitetails, mule deer, elk, moose, caribou, pretty much everything. But I've been seeing in the Facebook page and on the Cervicide app, there's a lot of questions around what kind of rifle I should get for certain kind of hunting and all these different things. And I really wanted to go through some of the considerations to make for most hunters and what these new kind of rifle calibers mean, what they're meant for, what you can realistically do with them as a hunter. But before that, I really think there's a need to understand maybe the more technical aspects of how shooting a rifle works and the science and engineering behind what that bullet is doing after you pull the trigger. So this will likely be part 1 of a 3-part series. I am going to assume you guys know some stuff about rifle shooting and hunting, but we'll get into some more technical things. I'm not going to show you equations or anything like that, but really try and explain the science behind what's going on here and how you can use this information to actually help select what kind of rifle you're going to want and need for the type of hunting that you do, as well as maximizing your rifle's abilities for that type of hunting. So this is going to go into intro to some of ballistic terms and things like that, mostly focused towards the average hunter who is shooting wild animals within 500 yards. So 500 yards and less, this is going to be the webinar for you. And we're going to continue the series and move on to hand loading and long range shooting, which is, I consider more than 500 yards out to however far you want to go, and those considerations after that. So we'll get started here. There's 4 main topics that I want to cover today. The first one is what point blank range is. I think pretty much everybody has heard the term of point blank range, especially when you're trying to make fun of someone who can't hit the broadside of a barn. I'm also going to go over danger space and what that is. And then there's a really, like, in the hunting industry right now, there's this really hot topic around the ballistic coefficient and BC and why you wouldn't want a certain kind of BC bullet and the kind of ammo selection that's being pushed by the industry today for different reasons. And so I'm going to go over what the ballistic coefficient is, what it means, how you can look for it when you're purchasing ammo, and its importance when you're looking at different kinds of rifle shooting, whether that's hunting, long range shooting, etc. And then at the end, we're going to tie it all together to understand what considerations you need to ask yourself when you're trying to select a rifle for different kinds of hunting. So we're going to start off with point blank range. So simply put, and this is a real term that's used by rifle shooters. It's simply put as the range at which a bullet's trajectory remains within a defined target area. Okay. So what that means is, say we have a regular whitetail deer whose vital region is 6 inches in diameter. So picture a 6-inch circle. That's your deer's vitals. The point blank range for shooting a deer is explained as the range of distance in which you will hit that 6 inches of vitals without having to adjust your scope or aim at a different point or perform like a Kentucky windage calculation. So the graph on the left kind of shows what that means. So the blue line is like a standard trajectory of a bullet for, like, say, a 300 Win Mag. Okay. So the orange dash lines are your +3 inches and -3 inches to cover the vitals. So as you can see, you can, with this specific rifle and this specific bullet, you can successfully shoot this animal from 0 to about 175 yards without having to move your scope or aim somewhere else. If it's outside of that point blank range, then you have to make some kind of adjustment. Does that make sense? So how do we use this in practice? So maximizing your point blank range is probably one of the most important things for a hunter. Okay. So being able to react quickly in situations is very important as a hunter, because most of the time you don't know when an animal is going to appear and then disappear. Sometimes you'll be walking up a hill, you'll peek your head over and it's right there looking at you. You have mere seconds to shoot. And the longer your point blank range is, the better chances you have of taking that animal in a quick situation. So instead of just sighting in your rifle for 100 yards or whatever you want to do, there's some things that you can do and look at specifically that will increase your point blank range and give you more flexibility when situations like that arise. The first one is understanding how your sight height affects your trajectory. So if you look at that top left graph, we have the blue line that we originally had in the previous slide, and you also have this red line. So typically for most rifles, it's common that with your scope rings, your sight height is usually like 1.5 inches. So when I talk about sight height, that really means the distance from the center of the scope to the center of the barrel. Now, increasing your sight height gives you the ability to increase your point blank range, shown by the red dot there. So increasing your sight height by just 1 inch to 2.5 inches by using like a Picatinny rail or something, you get an additional like 25 yards of distance within your point blank range. So just that 1 inch adjustment can give you an additional 25 yards associated with how far you can shoot without having to adjust your scope to remain within the vital section. The other way to do this, and once you get into long range shooting, it's actually more advantageous to have a lower sight height, but we won't get into that today. When we do our next series on long range shooting, I'll explain why a lower sight height can be more important. But today, for the average hunter, the one who's shooting 500 yards or less, this is probably a more effective method than a rifle that's set up for longer range shooting. The other way to do this is sighting in your rifle to the best range. And this is something that no one had ever told me, and I didn't learn until I kind of figured it out on my own a couple years ago. But typically people sight their rifles in for like 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards. And they make no considerations to how that trajectory looks across the entire range of where they're going to be shooting. So the most effective way to maximize your point blank range would be building out a graph like I have shown on the bottom left of the screen to see which range you should sight your rifle in to be able to effectively increase your point blank range. So you can see here that when the yellow line passes the 0 mark, we're at 220 yards. So ideally, to get the most out of your point blank range for this particular rifle, and we'll talk about how we set these up for individual rifles and ammo that you guys select. But the best way for this particular caliber, this rifle, this ammo that we selected here for our example, the best distance to sight this rifle in is at 200 yards, 220 yards. That way, you get the most out of the entire trajectory without having to move your scope. And you could see how much it increases your ability to not have to adjust your scope for taking a shot. So that yellow line, that animal could be between 0 and 250 yards, almost, 75 yards more than how we started, without having to adjust your scope and still being able to take that animal. So a lot of different things you could do. You can also adjust both your sight height and how you sight your rifle in to maximize this just by using the graphs. Any questions at this point? Cool. All right, couple things to consider when looking at this point blank range. It's not an end all be all, but you have to understand that there's also a lot of other variables that occur when you're hunting, and I think you guys all know all the different things that can go wrong. So by just using 6-inch vitals and figuring out your point blank range is up to 250 yards is not really ideal, because if you're out of breath, you make a bad shot, there's other errors that play into this. So I'd recommend, maybe a safety factor, maybe do a 4-inch diameter or something like that, and build out where you need to sight your rifle in based off of that. Another thing too, let me go back real quick. One of the advantages of making a chart like this is one of the things is, well, nobody has a 220 yard range, right? Or nobody has targets set up at 220 yards. That just doesn't make sense. What you can do is, if you have 100 yards, you can see how high you need to aim. You need to sight in your rifle at 100 yards to make your 0 point at 220 yards. So if we're looking at this yellow one right here, if we go to 100 yards and then we go over to here, you have to sight your rifle in 2 inches high above the 0 point at 100 yards to maximize your point blank range. So even if you're going out to the range and there's no 220 yard target, which there never will be, use this method to sight your rifle in 2 inches high at 100, and you'll be able to achieve that point blank range that way. So regardless of whether you want to make the better point blank range for your rifle or not, understanding this concept and at least knowing what the point blank range of your particular rifle is can be very valuable in hunting situations. So even if you don't want to take the time to re-sight in your rifle, or put a Picatinny rail on your scope to raise the sight height or anything like that, if you just want to keep it how it is, it's still good to perform this calculation and figure out what your point blank range is, so you're more informed as a hunter when you're going out. So if you see an animal at 220 yards, and you don't know what your point blank range is, or you don't know how your bullet performs at that distance, it's putting you at a disadvantage, and it's going to take you more time to figure out what you need to do to successfully shoot this animal, or even to the point where you wouldn't be comfortable enough to put a shot down range. So having an understanding of this concept and how each of your rifles look in this scenario is very important. All right, so I don't see any questions up right now, so we'll keep moving on. The next thing I want to talk about is the danger space. Very similar to point blank range, but a little different. So the danger space can be defined as the distance that a bullet will hit a particular size target when centered at a certain range. Okay, so really what this means is, if an animal is, in this example on the left right here, if there's an animal at 400 yards away, using our same 6-inch vitals, the red dashed lines are the 6-inch vitals, okay? So the blue line represents the trajectory that the bullet will go out to 400 yards. So what this danger space is telling you in this orange box that I have is how far off you can be at judging the distance and still being able to put a lethal shot on the animal. Okay, so the graph here does assume that we adjusted our scope for a 400-yard shot, or we know the bullet drop at that range and are aiming high enough to account for that. So assuming we're dialed in for 400 yards at the center, this is what this orange box is assuming. So danger space in practice can be extremely valuable because rangefinders are not always 100% accurate. I'm pretty hard on my gear, especially when I'm hunting out west and there could be issues with it. There might be times where I have to, guess what the yardage is when I don't have enough time to pull my rangefinder out and take an accurate range. So the danger space and understanding what that is for different ranges, because it will change based off of the range, is very important. Another thing too is a lot of times, for an example here, say you're out in Wyoming hunting antelope, and okay, got a question here. I'll stop and answer. So if you're dialed in for 100 yards using that graph, if I got to shoot 400, how do I get that range on my scope? Okay, good question. Good question. So there's a couple different ways to do that. One thing is creating a dope chart. Another way is practicing out to 400 yards and understanding and knowing your rifle. We will go over at the end here how to use ballistic calculators that you can find online. They're pretty simple to use, and I'll go over an example. You just put in some data, you put in what kind of ammo you're using, you put in what kind of rifle you're using, and it spits out these different graphs that I'm showing you here today. So you'll know how much your bullet is going to drop over 400 yards. So for most hunters, I don't think a lot of hunters actually dial their scope to 400 yards. If they know the bullet drops at 20 inches at 400 yards, they just aim 20 inches high, right? So same concept. If you do have a scope that allows you to dial it real time to different yardages, using either MOA or MILDOT. I'm not going to get into that today because that's more focused towards once you get into the longer range shooting. But that's something I'll go over in the next part of the series of understanding how to dial your scope for given yardages and things like that. So back to the example here. But say you're looking at a group of antelope in Wyoming. You find a buck that you want to shoot is 400 yards away. So you range it, it says 400 yards, you take the time to adjust your scope, or you calculated your bullet drop, you adjusted it. During that time, however, the buck you wanted to shoot has moved and another antelope has spotted you. You don't have enough time to readjust your scope or calculate the new bullet drop before they would run away. He's now at 420 yards. Do you know if you can still shoot him? Understanding your danger space is going to help you determine if there is movement, you're still okay. Another thing this can save you too, kind of like the picture I'm showing, you can see those little pieces of weeds that are over the antelope's vitals. A lot of times the rangefinder might pick that up, and that could be 20, 30 yards in front of the animal, and you're ranging that piece of grass. Once you get out to these, they're still short range, relatively short ranges, but 400 or 500 yards, those inches really start to matter, and those yards really start to matter. If you're 20 yards off, are you still going to lethally hit this animal? So understanding how danger space works and plays a role in how you shoot at different yardages is going to give you a huge advantage as a hunter. So even like if your rangefinder battery dies, or your rangefinder breaks while you're out on a trip, and you pop up and see an animal, if you're relatively good at judging yardages, I mean, if you're 100 yards, you can maybe be 50 yards off from your judgment and still lethally kill the animal. But you don't know that until you perform this calculation and understand what that bullet's doing at different yardages and how much leeway essentially you have in the accuracy of your ranging distance. So now we'll move on to the ballistics coefficient. The ballistics coefficient, BC, as you'll see it on all of your ammo and all that stuff, it'll say BC, and there'll be a G1 and a G7 number. Basically what this is, it's the particular bullet's ability to pass through air. So how easily this bullet can pass through air without being slowed down by the molecules in the air. Its units are a pressure, seen in pounds per square inch, but most of you probably don't really care. And it compares your bullet to a standard bullet that we know the drag of. So a bunch of years ago, we had this standard bullet shape called the G1 standard projectile. And you can see that there on the left. And basically, there was a lot of research done and testing done to define and 100% understand what the drag of that bullet is when it leaves a barrel. After years and years of refining and better understanding how this works, and a need and want in the industry for bullets to be effective at longer and longer ranges, bullets started getting skinnier and more aerodynamic and longer. So the G1 standard projectile that these bullets were being compared to were providing very large numbers and creating a lot of inaccuracies. So that's when the G7 standard projectile was created. And this is a standard bullet that you can see there that better represents the modern bullets that are created today. So Essentially, when you're looking at this on your ammo boxes, or if any of you reload and you see the bullet BC on the bullets that you purchase or on the ammo that you buy, the G number, the G1 number is pretty much pointless. So only look at the G7 bullet. And essentially, the higher the BC number, the better it will penetrate the air. So when you're out there comparing different kinds of ammo and different kinds of bullets, generally speaking, the G7 number that is higher will be better at penetrating the air. And this is mostly due to the bullet weight and shape. Okay. So the more aerodynamic looking the bullet is, the higher BC value it's going to have. And typically that means it's a longer bullet. And so the bullet weight goes up as well, most of the time. So it's important to understand this too, because a lot of times with these very long, high BC bullets, if you're not shooting most factory ammo, it's not going to be a problem. But when you're reloading and you find a bullet that has a super long length, that can be an issue, because it's either going to have to sit inside the casing more and you're going to have to use less powder, or it's the final length of the bullet isn't going to fit your action. So you have to understand when you're looking at these bullets, if you reload, not all of you can't use all of them in your standard action rifles. If you have a custom rifle that has a longer action, that's something you can look at. But if you're getting into rifles like that, I'm sure you already know this stuff. But in general, when you're buying ammo, looking at the G7 BC, the higher the number, the more aerodynamic it'll essentially be. Now, with that said, you would think that you always want the highest BC bullet that you could possibly achieve, because that's going to have the least resistance to the air. And that's a huge misconception. And it's something that's being pushed by the industry right now in general. All of these bullet manufacturers and ammo manufacturers are pushing all of this high BC ammo, like Nosler Trophy Grade, Hornady Precision Hunter. Those kinds of ammos are using high BC heavy bullets. But for the average hunter shooting 500 yards or less, you don't want this ammo. And here's the reason. Higher BC bullets are heavy and slow at short ranges. Low BC lightweight bullets are faster at shorter ranges. So if you're looking, generally speaking, 500 yards and in, your high BC bullets will not shoot as flat because of gravity drop. And the high BC bullets are pretty much all the time way more expensive, and most hunters will never use the advantages they provide because they're not shooting animals far enough for the high BC and heavy weight to make a true impact. So for 90 to 95% of hunters out there who rifle hunt, there is a clear advantage for using a lighter weight, lower BC bullet than the newer, heavy, high BC bullets. The first reason is they are way flatter shooting at hunting distances. And we already discussed how we want a very, very flat shooting bullet to maximize our point blank range and danger space at these closer ranges. So using these new, this ammo with really long, high BC bullets like Hornady Precision, Nosler Trophy grade, pretty much all the manufacturers have them out right now, is actually creating a disadvantage for most hunters because it's decreasing these really important things that most hunters need to understand and utilize and maximize to increase their chances of a lethal kill. There's a minimal difference in energy impact at hunting distance ranges as well. So even though the bullet is lighter and you would initially think that there's going to be less energy impact, it's going so much faster at these shorter ranges that it makes a minimal difference and isn't really going to matter inside, I would even say, maybe 800 yards. So that's one thing to understand. Just because it's a heavy bullet doesn't mean that it's going to have more energy at impact at all ranges. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the faster lower BC standard bullets are going to be cheaper and more readily available than the high BC bullet ammo. Okay. Now, there is a crossover point for which each caliber that you can calculate where the heavier high BC bullet becomes flatter and more effective. But today we're not going to talk about it all that much. Essentially, after a certain distance, the weight of your lighter bullet and the lack of aerodynamics will drastically decrease its effectiveness. But that higher BC bullet, even though it's heavier and starting out slower, it maintains that speed and its energy impact at longer ranges. So it's usually like 800, 900, 600 to 800 to 900 yards where this crossover point occurs, where your higher BC bullet that's heavier becomes more effective than your really fast low BC bullet. And at those longer ranges, your heavier bullet is actually flatter. So I'm talking, 600 to 2,000 yards is where these heavier bullets actually create, keep their energy and become flatter than the lighter bullets. But we're not worried about that today. So with all that said, we need to understand how we're going to select the right rifle caliber for what you're going to do. And these are just some questions that I would ask myself when I'm looking at purchasing a new rifle. So the first one is, what are your objectives, or what is the purpose of this rifle? Are you someone who, you live out in the East, you live in dense forest, most of the time you're going to be shooting 100 to maybe 200 yards and closer, most of the time 50 yards. Do you occasionally want to take, or do you live in the East and you want to take that first Western hunting trip and expand your range a little bit, out to 300, 400, maybe 500 yards? What kind of animal are you planning on hunting? Like, do you want a rifle that's good for deer? Do you want a rifle that's good for elk, moose? Do you have that 10-year plan to go on that grizzly bear hunt? What kind of animals are you going to hunt, and at what distances are you going to try and take that animal? Where do you plan on hunting with the rifle? Like I said, are you primarily going to be hunting out east with the occasional Western trip? Do you live out west in wide open country where you have the ability to shoot 600, 700, 800 plus yards at an animal and still be effective? Weight considerations. A lot of there's this huge thing right now about getting the lightest weight rifle, and it's really a big misunderstanding. Everybody wants these lightweight, super light mountain rifles that they could backpack in 10 miles with. But what they don't understand is if you get one of those in a 300 Win Mag or a 338 Lapua or a 300 Ultra Mag, 300 Weatherby, those bigger calibers, that thing is going to kick like a mule, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to maintain the view of your target in the scope. At longer ranges, a heavier rifle is actually more effective. Yeah, you have to, carry around a heavier rifle, but being able to successfully make a follow-up shot is way easier with a heavier rifle than it is a lighter rifle, because after the kick, the scope is still closer to the animal than with a lighter weight rifle. So many people want these like 5-pound, 6-pound, 4-pound rifles that are available today, but they take one shot and the scope is pointed up at the sky, and they have no idea what direction or where their animal ran off to after the shot. And that could be a huge issue. Even if you put an effective shot on the animal, if you're 600 yards away, you need to understand where that animal went. Did it drop dead? Which way did it run? Because you're going to have no understanding of where that animal went if you shoot a 5-pound rifle that's a 300 ultra mag and your scope goes up in the air and you look back after the shot and the animal's nowhere to be seen. So there's these considerations that in weight that you have to understand and really think about for what you're trying to do with this rifle. It's pretty important, actually. New calibers versus old calibers. All these new calibers like the PRCs and the Noslers and all these long range rifles coming out. Yeah, they're pretty cool. They're new. People want them. But really, are you going to use what these calibers are meant for? I mean, your standard rifles that have been around for years can easily shoot 1,000 yards an inch, and they're very effective at doing it. So why buy a 300 PRC or a 6.5 PRC or a 28 Nosler that's built for very long range shooting when the 7mm mag, the 270, the 300 Win Mag, the 300 Ultra Mag are proven rifles. They're readily available, and they're effective to any kind of hunting distance. Another thing too, market availability. These new calibers and ammo availability. These new calibers, they're sometimes hard to find. The ammo is very hard to find, especially if you're not hand loading. If you're hand loading, it makes it a lot easier. And honestly, I wouldn't even buy one of these new calibers that are meant for long range shooting unless you hand load, because you're not really using it to its full potential when all of the proven older calibers can do all this. The factory ammo is readily available, and they're proven to be effective. Energy impact and rifle kick, I talked about that already around, the rifle kick, the rifle itself being too light and all of that. Rifle and accessory costs, like you put down $5,000 on a rifle, now you have to get a $2,000-$3,000 scope. Like, what's the point of a $5,000 rifle if you put a $500 scope on it? You're still not using it for its effective range. So having a budget, understanding what all of these different components cost to set up a long range rifle, if that's what you're interested in. Honestly, I think the scope is more important than the rifle. I have a $500 Remington 700 BDL that I could shoot out to 1,200 yards, no problem. It's really understanding all of these different things. All right, I know you kind of touched on this, but is there a good all-around rifle for out west like you recommend? Yeah, so I guess if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, are you talking like pretty much all the western animals, or do you want to hunt mule deer? Are you going to hunt elk? Are you going to hunt moose? Are you going to hunt grizzlies? Are you going to hunt black bear? If you're looking for that one, 270, I love the 270. Honestly, the 270 is my favorite caliber. I'm probably going to get a 27 Nosler as my next rifle, because I'm just so obsessed with the 277 calibers. 27 Nosler will be a perfect out west rifle, honestly. 270, pretty good for elk all the way down, mule deer, antelope, all that stuff out west. I would not do any kind of long distance with the 270 for elk. Mule deer, it'll be effective pretty far out. I would say the 300 Win Mag is tried and true. It's been, the military sniper rifle caliber for however many years. I would say if you want one all around elk, deer, antelope, longest range rifle for out west hunting, you can't go wrong with the 300 Win Mag. Okay. Winchester short with 300 short mag, pretty good as well. Yep. So for black bear and white-tailed deer in the east, where you have a maximum range of 300 yards, 7mm mag. Actually, 7mm mag. Yeah, that's a great caliber. 300 yards for whitetail and for black bear, no problem with the 700mm mag. Sorry, 7mm mag. I would even say 7mm mag is probably one of your best choices for a general out west rifle as well, along with the 300 Win Mag. I would put those two side by side for a great general all around caliber for western hunting too. I have a 7mm mag. I killed my first elk out west with the 7mm mag. So it's a great caliber, great all around caliber for eastern hunting and western hunting. Little less energy than the 300 Win Mag, which is good for most things. It's still effective on elk for pretty much any distance you would want to shoot at one for normal hunters. So yeah, I would say 7mm mag or the 300 Win Mag are your best all around choices for western hunting. 30-30, definitely eastern gun, brush busting, close range, 50, 75 yard rifle, 30-30 for sure. So with that, I'm done. We can open all this up for questions. Here's some future topics that I would like to get into if you all are interested. Long range shooting, there's a lot. I think we might even have to turn this into a series in its own, because we're going to get into drop calculations, uphill, downhill shooting. There is a lot of considerations for elevation. If you're shooting straight uphill or downhill, a lot of times when you're western hunting up in the mountains, you have severe angles that you have to consider. Wind becomes an issue at longer ranges. I have wind drift there, but that should say spin drift or gyroscopic drift. The Coriolis effect, bullet stability, understanding ballistic programs, advanced range finding devices, what kind of range finding devices, wind meters, etc., that you would need for long range shooting, understanding the science of these high BC long range bullets. Also with long range shooting, you would definitely want to consider hand loading. You're not really maximizing the effectiveness of your rifle and everything else if you're not hand loading and fine tuning a load specific to the rifle that you purchase. And then how you can apply these long range techniques to rifle hunting situations. Yeah. Oh yeah. Ohio is interesting. For those of you that don't know, when you hunt in Ohio, you have to have a straight walled cartridge if you're hunting with a rifle. And what that means is most of you people that have rifles, if you look at your bullets, it has a case, and then right before where the bullet sits, there's a neck, and the neck is skinnier than the rest of the case, and that's your neck. In Ohio, it has to be a straight case. I don't have any pictures or examples of them, but like a 30-30 or a 450 Bushmaster are the types of rifles that you have to use in Ohio. 350 Legend, I think, is another one. I'm a fan of 450 Bushmaster and 350 Legend for the straight walled cartridges. Kyle, if you want to get in touch with me after this, we can look at the performance of those bullets, and I can help you understand which one is going to maximize your distance and energy and effectiveness out of the 4 or 5 different straight walled cases. Another thing too, Kyle, you are in an interesting scenario where when I talked about bullet coefficient, the G1 bullet coefficient is going to better apply to the type of ammo that you're purchasing over the G7. So that's one of those weird cases where you're straight walled cartridges, and that's why they still put the G1 BC on ammo, is for the bullets that still exist today that actually fit that profile better. So if you want to get with me after, we can look at some different options, and we can take a look. We can take a look at it. If that works for you. 4570, another one. Yep. I don't use the straight walled. I don't use the straight walled cartridges all that much. I have a 35 Remington that I use for most of the stuff I do where that's required. So I don't know off the top of my head which one is going to be the most effective in terms of ballistics, but we can take a look at that. I'll put some profiles together and say we sight them in for 50 yards. We'll see which one will perform the best.
Awesome. So guys, do you guys have any more questions here for Brian on the topics? I know, Brian, you had said it's so much to go over, everybody. So, Brian wanted to break it up into digestible sections. So hopefully it helped. Just let us know your thoughts. We're always down to make sure that you're getting what you need to know. We see so much stuff on Facebook and Google, and I mean just all kinds of crap, to be honest with you. So it's Brian has a track record of getting it done. So here at Cervicide, we want to make sure that we're giving you guys exactly what you ask for, and exactly the good information that you need. Brian, I really appreciate you jumping on. Looks like someone another question there for you.
Yeah, Eric, I would absolutely not shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor for elk hunting. You have these people, it's just like, it's like anything. I mean, you could kill an elk with a 22 but I look at it from, can a 6.5 Creedmoor kill an elk? Have people killed elk with a 6.5 Creedmoor? Yes. But what I look at in a rifle and an animal that I'm going to hunt is which one is going to give me the most versatility and correct for the most errors that might happen on my end in a situation. So for elk hunting, yeah, a 6.5 Creedmoor can kill an elk, and people have done it and people rave about it, but it is not even close to the best rifle to be shooting when you're going after elk. There's so many other calibers out there that will significantly increase your chances of actually killing one than a 6.5 Creedmoor. The 6.5 Creedmoor is more of like a fanboy caliber. No offense if any of you have them. I'll be honest with you, it's an awesome whitetail gun. It is a tack shooter. I don't have one personally, but I have multiple friends that have them. They can shoot dime size groups at 200 yards. It's a fantastic caliber. Whitetail hunting, mule deer hunting, probably okay. Antelope for sure. But I wouldn't take it anything bigger than that in my personal opinion. Your calibers that have the 6.5 in the 6.5 series, the Creedmoor is not even the best rifle. I mean, a 6.5 284 Norma that has been around for ages and is one of the most popular long range competition calibers out there is by far more effective at pretty much everything than the 6.5 Creedmoor. The 6.5 Creedmoor got popular because of famous hunters. It didn't get popular because it's the best long range round. It's not close to the best long range round. I will say that they did do something right in its effectiveness to be precise. Anyways, it's a great whitetail gun. It's a great mule deer gun. You could stretch it out a little bit longer, but if I were going to get a 6.5, a 6.5 something, it would be the 6.5 284 Norma. You could definitely kill elk and below with the 6.5 284 Norma. It goes faster. You could use heavier bullets. Overall better. But yeah, definitely not recommended for elk. You really have, when you're looking at the stuff, you really have to decide what's going to give me the best chances of actually taking an animal. And that's why we looked at point blank range, danger space, and all these things. When hunters have to make quick decisions where you don't have the time to sit there and calculate and range and all that stuff, you spend thousands of dollars to go on an elk hunt and you pop over a mountain and there it is standing right there and you don't know if you're going to hit it or not. That's an issue. I would say look at the most effective caliber you can possibly get for the animal you're going after, and that's going to increase your chances of taking one and decrease the uncertainties with you being able to make a lethal shot. No problem.
I was actually going to ask that. I was curious. I was like, I didn't really even hear about it until I started joining hunting Facebook groups when I started working here. And I was just really curious. I was like, growing up, it was 7mm Mauser, the 300 Winchester short mag, and the 270. Those were the ones where Grandpa passed them down. I was like, you got these.
I'll tell. So I have 3 long range rifles now. And my standard 270 is still my favorite gun.
Yeah, I like it because it's an all-around gun. Like I've used it down here for hogs, deer, and now that I know I can use it on private land for turkey, might even make it a little triple crown action there.
That's right.
But
yep.
Awesome. So
yeah, 270 will take down pretty much anything elk and below without any issues. I'd keep if you're shooting a 270, 300 yards is probably as far as I'd go with the 270. If I was elk hunting, like I said, 7mm mag, 300 Win Mag, 300 Ultra Mag, again, those larger calibers, it gives you just so much more opportunity and flexibility to be able to take one down.
Nice. That was great, man. So do you guys have any more questions? I am going to, Brian, if you're good, you feel like you're good on this part 1?
Yeah, I think so. We'll,
all right. Cool.
If you want to do like a poll or something on the Facebook or whatever and see what people would be interested in for like a round 2 or something, based off of what I showed in the future topics, we could set that up.
Yeah, no, for sure. What I'll do is that's a great idea. I'll do a poll and I will also put the recording up for the guys to check that out. I know a lot of people work night shift and stuff, so they'll definitely get to it. And I'm sure now that we've kind of got this intro part one done, it'll definitely help out. And I'll make that poll definitely tonight or tomorrow.